Hey guys, it's Dr. Edwards at Sarasota Vascular. So what's in a blood clot? We throw this term around and sometimes we're talking about a clot in the veins, which a lot of times would also be called a deep vein thrombosis or a DVT. But other times we talk about a blood clot in an artery. And I think it's important to distinguish that there are sometimes some differences. So broadly speaking, when we're talking about blood clots, sometimes we're talking about thrombus, which usually is referring to a clot that is forming inside the vessel, meaning, let's say you take a long flight. You go from LA to Tokyo and you're on the plane for 14 hours. You're not really moving around. Well, while you're sitting there, your blood's not really circulating effectively. The blood's just sitting in your veins, and what can happen is when we have that stasis, meaning blood's not really moving, clots can start to form. And so you might have a little bit of clot that starts to form, and then more clot will form on top of that, and more clot will form until all of a sudden the entire vein is blocked. The leg becomes swollen, painful, red, and the treatment is blood thinners. And it's actually an emergency. Blood thinners early is important to prevent blood clots from spreading and then ultimately breaking free and traveling to the lungs. If a clot breaks free and travels somewhere else, then it's called an embolus. Goes to the lungs, that's called a pulmonary embolus. What about a blood clot in the arteries? A lot of times a situation that might come up is where a blood clot forms in one place and travels someplace else. I already mentioned that's called an embolus. The scenario that comes to mind is maybe abnormal heart rhythms like atrial fibrillation or AFib. A big risk with AFib is that you can develop clots in the heart. And if the heart gets one good strong beat, that clot can break free and travel. That's called an embolus. What happens with an embolus is we tend to see a clot that lodges right here where we have a branch point. This can happen anywhere in the body. The important thing to consider is when you have risk factors for an embolus, like atrial fibrillation, or maybe clots run in your family, or maybe you're somebody who's had clots before. Sometimes blood thinners become a life-saving medication that can prevent that from happening. The good news is that we have really rapidly advancing technology and a number of different techniques that we can use to remove these clots. With traditional open surgery, sometimes we make a little incision in the artery. We place a balloon down here, and we use that balloon to pull that clot right out and restore blood flow immediately. Other techniques that we have are minimally invasive. This involves going through the vessels through a small puncture and using specialized catheters to remove the clots with suction. We have a lot of different techniques to treat different types of clots in both the arteries and the veins. Where they come from, the types of clot they are will inform the decisions, the treatment decisions that we use for each person. Blood clots fall into different flavors. We have embolus, we have thrombus, we can have blood clots in the arteries and the veins. The treatment is individualized to the patient and the different scenarios. Thanks for tuning into Whiteboard Wednesday.